I'm Ellie, working on Yalla. I have been in the tech space for about 10 years, but just really passionate about helping teams to actually trust the software that they ship, especially with agentic engineering workflows, because these tools are really powerful, but just we need a little bit of guardrails and like glue around them to make sure that things are not going off the rails. So I have been loading open source repositories into Yalla just for me to understand them better, but hopefully to, help the community understand them better as well. One of those is Backstage. So Backstage is one of the open source internal developer platform frameworks. I'll link to the walkthrough where I kind of did the high level overview of the architecture and everything that Yalla discovered. And of course, I'll link to all the docs too. But I have it running. I have a workflow running that once weekly pulls all of the changes from the upstream Backstage repository. So like the official open source one, pulls all those changes into my fork and then basically runs a change analysis on what has changed in the last week. I just want to talk through that. Let's see. So this one says it's medium risk to merge. This is medium risk to merge into my fork, which is probably showing up that way because I'm only syncing once per week. So it looks like a lot bigger of a tranche of changes, but upstream, they're fine. They're probably merging, daily, if not more often. Okay, so this one introduces a new metrics service. Looks like it supports MCP Actions as a plugin to enable MCP for AI agents, and then a refactor of the CLI. So let's see. I always think it's interesting to see what architecture items were added. So like new items that are showing up in your system design versus which ones were already in your design and maybe are just being modified. So this one says the metrics service is new, and then there's an MCP Actions Backend plugin. The catalog backend and the CLI were modified. That makes sense. So integrating the metrics service and then the backend CLI refactor. New capabilities, a standardized backend service for plugins without direct dependency on OpenTelemetry. That's cool. And then support for MCP, which is also really cool. I think anyone who has been building with agents or building agents themselves knows that MCP tools can be super, super helpful in just what your agents can output and making sure that it's good and kind of has the context that it needs. Tech stack changes, so Model Context Protocol SDK. We probably expected that from the description of the rest of the changes, so that makes sense. This says it doesn't violate any rules. I have not configured any rules for this one because it's an open source project and I don't know what their rules are, but this would flag if any of the configured rules are violated. Architecture decisions that are evident from this code. So this one's really helpful, at least for me, to pay attention to on my own projects, because you can kind of see like, okay, here's something that might affect how you do stuff later or whatever. Like, is this actually what you intended? So this one's saying any integration should migrate from the direct OTel, which is the OpenTelemetry imports, to the metrics service. So that makes sense. You just have to change any later imports. Easier global config. So this is saying it's a positive decision, but it's helpful just to see because architecture decisions always have trade-offs, right? Impact assessment. This one is just saying, I guess it's overall very positive. And then as far as actually merging and what changes would be required, this is just reminding us that plugin developers would need to use the metric service instead of that OTel. Everything else makes sense. So it's interesting to me to see what kinds of changes these open source projects are having. So again, this one was the changes in the last week or so from the Backstage open source. I'll link to all of this so you guys can kind of click through and see yourself. And I'll just keep doing this weekly and we can kind of track the changes over time. We'll be able to also see the system level changes start to highlight on this diagram and some of these other diagrams as we pull these changes in, so we can see the system evolution over time too, which is kind of fun. So I will post all those links for you guys and let me know what you want to see next.